The night my mother-in-law called me a financial parasite, I was sitting at their dining table, staring at a plate of untouched rice that had already gone cold. My hands were shaking, not because of what she said, but because, earlier that same morning, I had signed paperwork confirming I had just inherited $45 million. And none of them had any idea. Not my husband, not his parents, not the people who had spent 3 years reminding me, every single day, that I was worthless. And that night, as her words kept slicing into me in front of the entire family, I made a decision. I would let them keep thinking I was nothing, right up until the moment it destroyed them. Before we begin, hi, I'm Lily. If you love deeply emotional, true-feeling stories about betrayal and justice, make sure you subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I always read them, and it means more than you think. Now, let me tell you how silence became my greatest weapon. I wasn't always quiet. When I first married Daniel, I used to laugh loudly. I used to talk fast, dream big, and believe love could make any hardship feel small. Back then, I thought his parents' coldness would fade. I thought kindness would eventually soften them. I was wrong. The first time his mother, Margaret, called me a burden was 2 weeks after the wedding. It happened in their living room. I remember the smell of furniture polish and the sharp ticking of the antique clock on the wall. She was looking at me over her glasses. "You don't earn much, do you?" she asked flatly. I smiled politely. "I'm still building my career." Margaret's lips curled slightly. "So my son is expected to carry you." The words hit like a slap. Daniel just sat there, silent, staring at his phone. That was the moment I should have understood. But I didn't. Because I loved him. And love makes you explain away things that should have ended everything. The insults didn't stop. They evolved. Every dinner was an interrogation. How much are you saving? When will you contribute more? Do your parents send you money? And always, always that word. Burden. They said it casually, like it was a fact. Like it was my name. At night I would lie awake next to Daniel, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in the dark. My chest would feel heavy, like someone had placed a stone on it. "Why don't you ever defend me?" I whispered once. He sighed, annoyed. "They're just being practical." Practical. That word echoed in my head for weeks. Because what he meant was simple. To them, I wasn't family. I was an investment that wasn't paying returns. The worst night came on our 3rd anniversary. They hosted a dinner. His father toasted Daniel for carrying responsibilities. Then Margaret looked straight at me and said, smiling sweetly, "Some people marry into stability, others attach themselves to it." The table went quiet. My ears burned. My fingers dug into my palms so hard I left crescent marks. Daniel said nothing. Not one word. That night I cried silently in the bathroom so no one would hear. I remember looking at my reflection, eyes swollen, face pale. And thinking, how did I become this small? 3 months later, everything changed. My grandmother passed away. She had raised me after my parents died. She was my safe place, my only unconditional love. Losing her felt like losing the last person who saw my true worth. I cried for days. But then the lawyer called. I thought it was about a small inheritance. Maybe her house. Some savings. Instead, he slid a document across the table. The number at the bottom made my breath stop. $45 million. I stared at it, unable to process. "This includes her investment portfolio," he explained gently. "She never told anyone. She wanted you to discover it after she was gone." My hands trembled. Tears blurred the page. For the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief. Not happiness. Power. On the drive home, I kept hearing Margaret's voice in my head. Burden. Parasite. Worthless. I realized something chilling. The people who had humiliated me for years would treat me completely differently if they knew. Not because they loved me, but because of money. And that thought changed everything. That night at dinner, Margaret made her usual comment. Daniel works so hard, some wives would feel ashamed contributing so little. I looked up slowly. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt calm. Because I knew something they didn't. I had more wealth than all of them combined. And they still believed I was powerless. I swallowed my food quietly and said nothing, because in that moment, a plan was already beginning to form, and it would take them a long time to realize. Silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it's the beginning of revenge. After I learned about the inheritance, something inside me changed in a way I couldn't explain to anyone. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't even relief. It was something quieter, heavier, like the moment before a storm breaks, when the air becomes thick and still. I stopped reacting to them, and that confused them more than anything. Before, every insult used to land like a punch. Margaret would say something cutting, and I'd go silent with hurt. Now, I went silent with control, and she noticed. "Oh," she said one night, narrowing her eyes at me, "no tears today." Her voice had that sharp metallic edge, like a knife being dragged slowly across a plate. I simply looked at her and said calmly, "I'm just tired." Which was true. But not in the way she thought. I wasn't tired of work. I was tired of pretending I was powerless. That night, Daniel followed me into the bedroom. He shut the door harder than necessary. "What's wrong with you lately?" he asked. The tone wasn't concerned. It was irritated. Like I was malfunctioning. "Nothing," I said quietly. He stared at me. "You've been strange, detached, you don't even argue anymore." I almost laughed. For years I had begged him to stand up for me. Now he was unsettled because I had stopped needing him. "I'm just focusing on myself," I replied. He scoffed, "You don't even have anything to focus on." The words were casual, but they landed like ice water down my spine. Because he truly believed that. He truly believed I had nothing. That night after he fell asleep, I lay awake staring into the darkness. My mind replayed every insult, every dismissal, every time he had chosen their comfort over my dignity. I realized something that hurt more than anything Margaret had ever said. Daniel didn't just allow their cruelty. He agreed with it. And that realization broke something inside me completely. But it also set something else free. A week later, the financial advisor assigned to manage the inheritance invited me to his office. I remember walking into that sleek glass building, the air cool and sterile, the faint scent of polished marble in the lobby. For the first time in years, I felt respected. People spoke gently to me. They listened. They explained things patiently. Not once did anyone look at me like I was a burden. And I realized how much I had been starving for basic human dignity. "Miss Lily," the advisor said kindly, "this level of wealth gives you freedom, not just financially, but personally." Freedom. The word echoed in my mind long after I left. Because I didn't feel free. Not yet. I was still living in a house where every breath felt monitored. Every movement judged. Every silence interpreted as weakness. But for the first time, I knew I didn't have to stay trapped. At home, the pressure intensified. Margaret had begun complaining more openly. "I don't understand why Daniel tolerates this situation," she said loudly during one dinner. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. But I stayed calm. She continued, voice dripping with condescension. "A wife should bring stability, not dependency." Daniel nodded slightly. Just slightly. But it felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. That night I confronted him. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. Do you really think I'm a burden? He didn't hesitate. Well, financially, yes. The bluntness stunned me. But it's not personal, he added quickly. It's just facts. Facts. The word echoed in my mind like a hollow drum. That was the moment something inside me went completely cold. Because I realized he didn't love me. He loved what I represented. And since he believed I represented nothing, I was nothing to him. After that, I stopped trying entirely. I stopped cooking for him, stopped initiating conversations, stopped pretending we were a partnership. And he noticed. But instead of concern, he grew resentful. You've become useless even emotionally now, he snapped one evening. Useless. The word settled over me like falling ash. And strangely, I felt nothing. Because I knew something he didn't. I wasn't useless. I was invisible. And invisibility can be very powerful. The final breaking point came 2 months later. Margaret invited extended relatives for dinner. I didn't know what she had planned. But I should have guessed. Halfway through the meal, she stood up with a fake smile. I think we should address something openly, she said. My stomach dropped. She turned toward me. Her voice softened into a cruel sweetness. Lily has been part of this family for years, but unfortunately she contributes nothing. A murmur spread across the table. Heat rushed to my face. My hands trembled under the table. And I believe, she continued calmly, Daniel deserves a partner who can match his status. The implication was crystal clear. She wanted him to divorce me. And she was saying it publicly. I looked at Daniel. Waiting. Hopping. Just once. He would defend me. He didn't. He kept staring at his plate. Silent. Complicit. That silence hurt more than all her words combined. Because it confirmed everything. I was alone in that marriage. Completely. Something shifted inside me right then. Not sadness. Not anger. Something sharper. Colder. Final. I stood up quietly. The room went still. Margaret looked satisfied, as if she expected tears. An apology. Begging. Instead, I said calmly, "You're right." Her smile froze. The room went silent. "I don't belong here," I continued softly. Daniel looked up, startled. "But don't worry," I added. "I won't be a burden much longer." I walked out of that house that night. The cool air outside hit my face like a shock. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. But for the first time in years, I could breathe. As I drove away, a realization settled over me with absolute clarity. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had pushed me out. They thought they had won. But what they didn't know was that the moment I left that house, I wasn't running away. I was stepping into control. And they had no idea just how devastating that control was about to become. The night I left their house, I didn't cry. That surprised me. For years, I had cried over every insult, every silent betrayal, every lonely dinner where I felt like an unwanted guest in my own marriage. But as I drove through the empty streets, hands steady on the steering wheel, something inside me felt still. Cold. Clear. Like a fog had finally lifted. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was done. I checked into a quiet hotel that night. The room smelled faintly of fresh linen and lemon cleaner. The bed was soft, untouched. No tension. No judgment. No voices whispering about my worth. I sat at the edge of the mattress and stared at my hands for a long time. They weren't shaking. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control of my life, and that realization was intoxicating. The next morning, Daniel called. Over and over. His name kept flashing on my phone screen like a ghost from a life I had already left behind. I let it ring. Eventually, I answered. His voice came out sharp, irritated. Where are you? Not are you okay? Not why did you leave? Just control. Just entitlement. I needed space, I said calmly. He exhaled loudly. You embarrassed my parents. I closed my eyes for a moment. That sentence told me everything. Not concern. Not regret. Only pride. Only appearances. Come back home, he said finally. The word home felt hollow. That place had never been a home. It had been a courtroom. And I had been on trial every single day. I don't think I will, I replied quietly. Silence fell on the line. Then his tone changed. It became cold. You realize you can't support yourself without me, right? The words were calm. Matter of fact. Cruel in their certainty. And in that moment, I almost smiled. Because he still had no idea. That night I met with my lawyer. The office was dim, warm lighting reflecting off dark wooden shelves. I remember sitting there, feeling strangely peaceful. I want to file for divorce, I said. The words felt heavy, but freeing. Like cutting the last chain, tying me to years of humiliation. The lawyer nodded. Do you want to disclose your inheritance in the filings? I paused. And for the first time since learning about the money, I spoke my plan out loud. No, I said quietly. Not yet. Because I didn't just want to leave. I wanted them to face the truth. To feel what I had felt. The dismissal. The shock. The realization of how wrong they had been. But I wanted it to happen at the perfect moment. Not out of anger. Out of justice. Over the next weeks, Daniel's behavior changed dramatically. At first he was annoyed. Then impatient. Then something else. Desperate. Because when I didn't return home, he realized he couldn't control me anymore. One evening, he showed up outside my apartment building. I watched from the window as he paced, checking his phone, running a hand through his hair repeatedly. He looked stressed. Worried. Smaller than I had ever seen him. When I finally went down to meet him, his eyes searched my face anxiously. You're overreacting, he said quickly. We can fix this. His voice sounded almost pleading. But there was no remorse in it. Only urgency. I don't think we can, I replied calmly. That's when his mask slipped. His jaw tightened. Do you know how expensive this divorce will be for you? He snapped. You can't afford lawyers. The words hung in the air. And something inside me hardened permanently. Because even now, he still believed I was powerless. Around that time, I learned something interesting. Daniel had been telling everyone a story. That I had abandoned him. That I was unstable. That I was financially dependent and unable to cope alone. Margaret, of course, reinforced this narrative. She told relatives I had run away because I couldn't handle responsibility. I listened quietly as mutual acquaintances repeated these things to me. And each time, I said nothing, because silence was becoming my greatest strategy. Meanwhile, I began rebuilding my life quietly. I moved into a beautiful apartment overlooking the city skyline. I hired financial planners, invested wisely, started funding a scholarship program in my grandmother's name. For the first time, I was creating something meaningful, something entirely mine. But the real turning point came during a mediation session. Daniel walked in confident, almost smug. He assumed I would beg for support. He assumed I had no leverage. His lawyer even spoke condescendingly. "Mrs. Lilly has no independent financial standing," he said. I sat there quietly, hands folded in my lap, watching them, listening, letting them reveal exactly who they were. Then Daniel made a mistake. A big one. He leaned forward and said coldly, "Let's be realistic, she has nothing. I carried her for years." Nothing. The word echoed in the room. And in that moment, I knew exactly when I would reveal the truth. Not during mediation. Not during private negotiations. But somewhere far more public. Somewhere their pride mattered most. Somewhere their humiliation would match mine. As I left the building that day, the air felt electric. I could almost taste the anticipation. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was orchestrating. And they were walking straight into it. Completely blind. 2 weeks later, Margaret called unexpectedly. Her tone was syrupy sweet. Artificial. Uncomfortable. "We're hosting a large family gathering," she said. "We think it's time to discuss final arrangements, properly." I knew what she meant. She wanted to finalize my removal from their lives. Publicly. Just like she had humiliated me before. I agreed immediately. Because I knew. That would be the night everything changed. The night their carefully built image would collapse. The night they would realize. The person they had treated like nothing had the power to destroy everything they valued. And I would do it calmly. Quietly. Without raising my voice even once. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not anger. Not sadness. But anticipation. Because after years of being dismissed, the moment of truth was finally coming. And when it arrived, it would be unforgettable. The night of the gathering, I arrived exactly on time. Not early. Not late. Just precise. The house looked exactly the same as it always had. Perfectly polished floors. Crystal lights casting a warm glow. Everything arranged to project success, status, control. But as I stepped inside, I noticed something different. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt detached. Like I was walking into a place that no longer had any power over me. Margaret greeted me at the door with a tight smile. Her eyes scanned my outfit immediately. Assessing. Judging. I was wearing a simple but elegant black dress. Nothing flashy. But the fabric was unmistakably high quality. She noticed. Her eyebrows twitched slightly. But she said nothing. Because she still believed she held the upper hand. The living room was full. Relatives. Family friends. People who had heard Margaret's version of the story for months. I could feel their eyes on me. Curious. Critical. Waiting to see the burden who had finally been cast out. Daniel stood near the fireplace. His posture stiff. His expression guarded. But when he saw me, something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty. Because I wasn't nervous. I wasn't apologetic. I wasn't broken. I was calm. Margaret clinked a glass to get everyone's attention. The sound cut through the room sharply. "I think it's time," she announced, voice smooth and confident, "to formally acknowledge that Daniel and Lily are going their separate ways." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. She continued, "Marriage requires balance, contribution, partnership, and unfortunately not all unions succeed when one person cannot carry their weight." The words were deliberate, cruel, public. exactly the kind of humiliation she had always preferred. All eyes turned toward me. The air felt thick, heavy, charged. Margaret looked at me expectantly, waiting for tears, for shame, for silence. Instead, I stepped forward calmly. My heels clicked softly against the marble floor, each step echoing in the quiet room. And when I spoke, my voice was steady, clear, unshakable. "You're right," I said. A faint smile crossed Margaret's face. She thought I was conceding. But then I continued. For years I was told I contributed nothing. The room grew very still. "So I believed it," I added quietly. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Margaret's smile faltered slightly. Because my tone wasn't emotional. It was factual. Controlled. "I was called a burden," I went on. "A parasite, someone who attached herself to stability." I looked directly at Margaret. Her face tightened. "But the truth," I said slowly, "is that none of you ever actually knew me." A ripple of tension spread through the room. Daniel frowned. "What are you talking about?" he asked. I reached into my bag calmly and pulled out a folder. The sound of paper sliding against leather was soft. But in that silent room, it sounded like thunder. I placed the documents on the table in front of them. "My grandmother passed away last year," I said. Margaret crossed her arms impatiently. "Yes, we know," she said sharply. But her confidence was cracking. Because she sensed something shifting. "I inherited her estate," I continued. "And her investment portfolio." I paused. Just long enough for the tension to stretch tight. Then I said quietly, "The total value was $45 million. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't disbelief. It was shock so complete. It erased sound itself. Daniel stared at me. His face drained of color. Margaret's mouth opened slightly. No words came out. The relatives exchanged stunned looks. Daniel spoke first. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "That's not possible." I met his gaze calmly. "I have documentation," I said. His hands trembled as he flipped through the papers. His breathing grew uneven. Because he knew they were real. He knew the legal seals couldn't be faked. Margaret's face had turned pale. For the first time since I had known her, she looked small. You never told us," she stammered. Her voice no longer sharp. No longer superior. Just shaken. I looked at her steadily. "No," I said softly. "Because you had already decided who I was." Her shoulders stiffened. "But we're family," she protested weakly. The word family hung in the air like a broken promise. I took a slow breath and said the words that ended everything. "You never treated me like family. You treated me like an investment that failed." The room was completely silent. "You measured my worth in money," I continued calmly. "So I let you believe I had none." Daniel stepped forward suddenly. His voice urgent. Desperate. "Lily, we can fix this," he said. His eyes were wide. Pleading. But not with love. With panic. With greed. Because now he saw what he had lost. I felt something inside me settle. A final, quiet closure. "No," I said gently. "There's nothing to fix." His face crumpled. "You're throwing away our marriage over pride," he demanded. I shook my head slowly. "No," I replied. "I'm ending it because of truth." I looked around the room one last time. At the faces that had judged me, dismissed me, believed I was nothing. And I said calmly, "You didn't lose me because I was a burden. You lost me because you never saw my value until it had a price tag. Then I picked up my bag, turned around, and walked out. The sound of my heels echoed behind me. No one tried to stop me, because they couldn't. They had lost all power in that moment. In the months that followed, everything changed. The divorce finalized quickly. Daniel tried to negotiate, tried to reconcile, even begged. But it was too late. Because love cannot survive where respect never existed. Margaret's reputation suffered quietly. People talked, not loudly, but enough, because humiliation leaves a long shadow. As for me, I built a life defined not by money, but by dignity. I funded education programs, opened foundations in my grandmother's name, created opportunities for people who had been underestimated, just like I once was. And for the first time, I felt truly free. Sometimes people ask me if I regret staying silent for so long. I don't, because silence taught me something powerful. Your worth is not determined by what others see. It's determined by what you choose to reveal. And when you reveal it, the truth can be the most devastating form of justice. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or made to feel small, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. And remember this: the people who measure your value by what you give them are the same ones who will crumble when they realize what they lost. I'm Lily, and this was the night silence became my greatest revenge.